Right, I think I can see that the numbers are plateauing a little bit. So in the interest of time, I think we'll get going. So welcome everyone today to this Research Champions Workshop 2002. My name is Amit Kulkarni and I'm the Head of Research and Outcomes here at the RCSLT. I'm a clinician by background. I'm just looking at all the names of people coming through, and it's fantastic to see so many people I recognise. I think that's a great testament to your dedication to support research culture within speech and language therapy. But equally so, there's many faces and names that I've never seen before. So I think that's a wonderful reflection upon the sort of developing pipeline of research interest and research capacity within our profession. So very much a big welcome to you if you're a new research champion and joining us for the first time today. Can we go on to the next slide? So I'm just going to go through a little bit of housekeeping, and then I'm going to talk about our aims for the day. And I'm under strict orders to try and cut out any waffle. So I'll try to get through this quickly before we get onto the content, but cutting out waffle is not my strong point. I will be completely honest with you. Just to say initially, please do add your name to your, so that we can see it. So you can change your name and Zoom by clicking on the 3 dots in your image, and then this function is your virtual delegate badge. Just a gentle reminder that we are going to be recording presentations from this event, so it can be made available to those who haven't been able to join us. So please do bear that in mind when you're thinking about your camera and your name. Do use the chat function at any point. You can either, I don't know if that means that somebody is not on mute, but if you are, when you join, please, if you could just put yourself on mute. Yeah, please use the chat function. You can either send a message to the whole group, or you can send a message to individual members of RCSLT staff and presenters. It's always great for presenters to see people's faces, so if you are happy to, then please do turn your camera on, but no problem if you prefer not to do that. Just in case you have other appointments or things today, just to let you know, you can leave the event, excuse me, and re-enter at any time, and you would just use the same link. Our colleague Jazz is on hand to help you if you have any access issues or technical issues, so please do get in touch with her if you need. Okay, next slide, please. So I'm not going to go over these in detail because I know you'll have seen these in the pre-event material, but I just wanted to touch on the aims and objectives to really focus us on why we are here before we start the day. So it's been a couple of years since we've managed to have a research champions event. Of course, there is something that happened in the world over the past couple of years that stopped us. So it's really pleasing to be able to come back to this, albeit virtually today. Our aims are, as always, to provide a kind of a reminder of the Research Champions Network to you, of the role of the network, the things that it offers, and our intentions through the network. Even though it's a virtual event, we want to offer opportunities for you to network with each other during the event. So after the first part of the event finishes at 12:45, there'll be poster sessions and networking sessions for you to get together with others and collaborate in the final part of the day. We're going to take the opportunity to tell you about some strategic developments that have happened over the past couple of years, mainly focusing on HEE's and RCSLT strategy, but also touching on important strategy documents across the world of AHP research. We received lots of interest in thinking specifically about managers, so we'll have a session focused with some managers who have managed to facilitate research within their teams, and there'll be a Q&A session with them as well as presentations. There'll be opportunities to hear from clinical developments from research champions, but also practical questions around how they have developed research culture within their teams in order for us to share best practice and to help you to be able to do the same things within your teams. And across the day, there'll be opportunities for you to reflect on your personal research development plans. So hopefully I kept the waffle to a minimum, and we're relatively quickly getting onto our first content presentation of the day, which is going to be mainly led by my colleague Katie. I think I'm just saying this slide first, is that correct?
Yeah,
so just before I hand over to Katie, I just wanted to highlight the pre-event material. So I'm sure you will have seen this already, but Katie has done a couple of fantastic videos, one of which is an introduction to the research and outcomes team as we currently stand, and an overview of some of our work over the past couple of years. And the second is a more detailed look at the SLT Research Practitioner Framework resource map, which a lot of this day is kind of built around. So if you haven't had the opportunity to watch those yet, please do go back to those after the main events, because they'll offer insights into various things happening through the RCSLT in research. So now, seamlessly, I'm handing over to Katie.
Thanks, Amit. Morning, everyone. Really nice to see you all, as Amit said. I'm also going to try and minimise the waffle in this section, but we'll see how we go. So I just wanted to give a brief kind of overview and update of the Research Champions Network, things that have happened over the last couple of years, and also a bit of a kind of a stock take on where we are now. So just to kind of get us warming up for the day or whatever, I thought if you could all just take a couple of moments to think about what being a research champion means to you. And if you would be so kind as to kind of maybe drop your thoughts in the chat, maybe also take this as an opportunity to introduce yourself, and let's kind of get some of that networking and those things thrown around to kind of get us ready for the day. So I'm going to carry on going through the slides, but if I could invite you all to take a moment to think about that and maybe share your ideas with the group. In case you're in need of any inspiration, the Research Champions, as you hopefully do know, or maybe some of those of you who are new to the network are not aware of, but we do have a mission statement and a vision statement. I'm not going to read through these, but that is our mission statement on the screen. So hopefully that's something that resonates with everyone here today. And similarly, our vision is kind of based around these 3 points. And I suppose, especially this last one on here, we're hoping that that is something you will kind of get out of today as much as possible. So what's happened over the last few years? As Amit said, it has been quite some time since we've managed to have a Research Champions workshop. So just thought I'd give you a couple of highlights on what's kind of happened since then. Really, the main thing is we've introduced a new Research Champion registration process, which I suspect quite a few of you that are in the meeting today have actually completed. So a big part of work of this was identifying some kind of measure or metric that we could embed in the Research Champions registration. And we did some scoping work and identified this on the screen. As you can see, it's called the EPIC scales. And this is a robust kind of validated measure of evaluating evidence-based practice confidence. And we embedded this into the registration process. And we also modified it just slightly to include a little bit more focus on service user preferences in particular, which we felt it was lacking, but this was an important part for us for the Research Champions Network. So for those of you who are, have maybe not have registered as a Research Champion some time ago and maybe did not complete these scales, you are very welcome to do a kind of an update to your registration. So there's a QR code on the screen, but I'll also plug the links in the chat at another point later today if you want to kind of update your details and give us that insight as well into your those other kind of metrics as I just had on the screen. So where are we now? We currently have over 400 Research Champions. We've had a nice to see a little influx of Research Champion registrations in the run up to this event, which is always really nice. But I suppose what we were, especially pleased to see, I suppose, is that even throughout the, quite challenging, to say the least, couple of years, we continue to have people register kind of throughout the pandemic as Research Champions. So, perhaps that raises kind of the importance of Research Champions, and our mission and vision is still obviously even more possibly relevant throughout the COVID-19 pandemic. So using that, the registration information that we have on Research Champions, I just thought I'd offer a little stock take on who is the network. We have 90% of the network are practicing speech and language therapists. So we are quite a diverse network. So that's not necessarily exclusively clinicians. It could be clinical academics or anyone that has kind of a foot in the clinical world. And I suppose what's even more interesting for us is this next stat on there is that around 50% also have a post-registration academic qualification. So even though we are a majority of our practicing speech and language therapists, we're speech and language therapists who are doing possibly other courses, whether it's masters or masters in research or PhDs and so on. And delighted to say that at present we have at least some coverage of every kind of clinical area as well. So hopefully this just really highlights the diversity of the Research Champions Network, our inclusivity, and how really this network is for kind of everyone at all stages and levels of their sort of research journey. I was going to go into a bit of detail on this, but I think given the time I won't. But just to say, on those EPIC scales that I mentioned above, overall you can see our research champions fared pretty confidently on those things. I've circled there the two highest and the two lowest. Just to briefly say the two highest, I think were around confidence in involving service users and in identifying knowledge gaps. So this is a really, really nice, top two things to be is those two. So that's brilliant to see. And I think the lower scoring ones, although still not particularly low, were actually based around critical appraisal. So I think that's an important note for us, especially at RCSLT, to maybe think about what we can be doing to support research champions in that area going forward. This is a little word cloud of the statement that research champions are asked to provide upon registration. So why do you want to be a research champion? There are probably some words there that are not shocking, given that was the question. But I think it's also really nice to see we've got, service users and the profession and those kinds of ideas coming through on that word cloud as well. I'm going to skip through this one because of time, but just to say, please do use the Basecamp group. This is the main form of communications for research champions. And it is your group and not mine. So I think probably if you look, it's probably a lot of my name cropping up on there at the moment, but I would really like to welcome you all, especially following today, to kind of make use of that space as much as you wish to. Sorry, that was a whistle stop tour. I am going to pass back to Amit now, and I hope you really enjoy the day.
Thank you, Katie. Fantastic timekeeping. You made up for all of my waffling, so thank you so much for that. We're now, so we've heard a little bit about Research Champions Network, and of course that's accompanied by the pre-event videos. We're now going to have a little focus on strategy. So Dr. Hazel Rudd and I are going to have a quick think, if you go to the next slide as well, Katie, about the HE and RCSLT vision and strategy. So Hazel, I'll let you start.
Yeah, thank you for the invitation to talk and to join you in this double act, Amit. So the aim for this section is to focus on the national strategy that's come out recently, so in January, and looking at the RCSLT strategic and operational plans in response to that. That's what we're going to do together in this slot. Next slide. This is how we're going to use the time for the next 20 minutes or so to cover that key aim. I'm going to start off by just giving a very brief introduction to the strategy and talk a little bit more about the current implementation work, and pass to Amit, who will talk about RCSLT's work, the strategic level and the operational plan that's underway. And then we're going to go together, Amit and I, in a little bit more detail through the strategic aims and objectives from the HEE strategy, Health Education England, and looking at RCSLT operational work, and then finish off by saying, okay, how does that have relevance for yourselves as research champions? Next slide. So these are my contact details. Okay, so I was asked to lead this national strategy on Health Education England, and I've done it as a conversation, and I'm still inviting people to contact me directly, and people do, and I'm really pleased. People raise really important questions, also just share experiences and examples of good practice that you are aware of either that you've seen from colleagues and local teams and services at any level, please contact me, and please keep the conversation going on social media. We're using this hashtag AHP Research. We've adopted that. Okay, next slide. Thank you. Now then, I've just popped into the chat again now, the link for where you can find out more about the published strategy. The strategy was developed as an authentic and very active co-production process with all 14 allied health professional associations, and with the Council of Deans for Health, and with CAPA, the Council for Allied Health Professions Research. I'd like to make the point that all our professional associations and the Council for Allied Health Professions Research are UK-wide. So this push to have research and innovation strategies is universal. There are many strategies published across many disciplines in health and care, and many regional and organisational strategies as well. I'm very confident that all these strategies are very cohesive. We're all saying the same things. The really important part is the implementation work, where we push to make these things happen. But I would like to make the point that RCSLT are watching for the strategy development that's underway in the other devolved nations of UK. I'm also in conversation, and I'm working together in that space, as well as in multi-professional space with other healthcare professions and medicine. So this is, we're all going in the same direction. Next slide, thank you. So this is where you can download the strategy document that was launched in January this year. And in the links I've put in the chat, you can find a downloadable one-page summary and a sub 5-minute YouTube video. So you can drink your cup of tea while you watch that little video. You'll have finished watching the video before you finished your cup of tea. And you can share that one-page summary with colleagues at work, with other people. I'm hoping that will be a useful resource for people. That's what I want to do, and that's partly what this session today is about. Many of you will have seen the strategy and looked in detail at it already, but I'm trying to help you be able to communicate that message in bite-sized chunks to other people. Next slide. Okay, so what's really important about this strategy for me is that it covers not only capability building, how we can offer support for individuals to become more skilled, more confident and more active in research activities and roles, and maybe in careers, but the capacity building across the wider workforce means that we're also focusing two sides of the same coin, getting people more research active, getting research embedded into our routine practice. So that's what the capacity is. Context is about systems and processes to help support that to happen. And culture is about the expectations of ourselves, about our professional role and identity, and about other stakeholders, that research and innovation, service improvement becomes an integral part of our routine processes of care and our routine practice. Next slide. Okay, in simple terms, there are just 3 strategic vision statements in this strategy. They are bold, they are ambitious, because we are trying to really push forward and accelerate the pace of change on behalf of all AHP professional associations. We have achieved a lot. RCSLT has achieved a lot by supporting our membership over the last couple of decades in particular. We need to push this change in for transformational and accelerated rates of change. So these are our 3 vision statements. Each of these is underpinned by strategic aims and strategic objectives, which Amit and I will explore a little bit more detail in a moment. Next slide. This is what we hope to achieve by bringing together, bridging more powerfully than ever before between the academic expertise and clinical expertise. Then we will really have impact and make a difference, so that research will make a difference for the service users and their families, and for us as professionals delivering these services. And we must be smart and scientific about measuring where are we now and how are we progressing with this. Next slide. Okay, so the key driver in all this is to improve the quality of services, but by doing that, or to enable us to do that, we need to increase the visibility, the reputation, and the impact of our research. We need to secure sustainable roles and in both academic careers and clinical academic careers. Next slide. This is part of the one-page summary. This is an overview of the progress. So the launch of the strategy in January this year, and in January next year, we're having an anniversary event. There'll be lots of important announcements on that day, and lots of good examples and exciting and useful, valuable links and resources shared. It's an online event. It's a part day only because we know everyone is so busy, and it will be recorded and uploaded afterwards on the CAPA website. Because we are promoting CAPA to be increasingly the portal, the go-to one-stop shop for all information about research, innovation and service improvement for allied health professionals. Next slide. So we're in the implementation phase. I'm doing a lot of work, having lots of conversations with different stakeholders at high strategic levels, but also gathering lots of examples of exciting and really valuable impact on the ground from grassroots up. Next slide. Last week, England, the Chief Allied Health Professions Officer, Suzanne Rastrick, launched her 5-year strategy. And this is a refresh of the previous 5-year strategy, where research and innovation were implicit, but now more than ever before, they're made explicit. They are underpinning as an enhanced foundation. The research and innovation strategy that was published in January is now embedded absolutely as a underpinning this new strategy. And last slide of this section. This is just a little screenshot which you can find in that document, again, easily to be found and downloaded. It emphasises this vision that the research and innovation service improvement culture needs to grow from grassroots upwards, as well as from strategic level downwards, supporting that. You are all the ambassadors at the grassroots to really help to push this change. Next slide, handing back to Amit to talk about RCSLT.
Thanks, Aidan. So I won't go into this in huge amounts of detail, but I just wanted to show you how the RCSLT strategic and operational plans in general and in relation to research have been developed. So really just to summarise, over this strategic period, we have developed a 5-year strategic vision going from 2022 to 2027. This has been informed by horizon scanning that took place over 2021. And actually there were 2 sessions specifically with research champions and with researchers, but that horizon scanning took place with all stakeholders really in this area. So service users, board of governors, staff, various membership groups. From that, we've developed our 5-year strategic vision. And then each year we're developing and implementing 1-year operational plans to achieve that vision. So if you go to the next slide, the horizon scanning activities has enabled us to develop this overarching vision. And as you can see, one of the strategic areas of focus is very explicitly about about research. So innovation and excellence in research and clinical practice. So a lot of the research team's activities are focused there. But actually what's good about the approach we've taken over this period, it's not exclusively the research team or research and outcomes team rather that are just focused on this area. Cross-organisationally, we're very interested in working specifically on this area. And then the flip side of that is that, as I'm sure you'll be able to see really, research and evidence isn't limited to just that area of strategic focus. So for example, when we are working with government to champion the value and impact of speech and language therapy, our policy team need evidence in order to do that. So just to assure you that research and evidence spans across all 8 areas of our strategic focus. Going on to the next slide. in this month's bulletin that's coming out in the next couple of days, if it hasn't hit your doorsteps yet, my colleague Catherine, who's our outcomes manager, and I have written this Research and Outcomes Forum, which talks a little bit about the development of the strategic vision and operational plans. And we just offer some examples of activities that the Research and Outcomes team are leading on across the 8 different areas of the vision. It's not comprehensive. We've got many more activities than those specified here, but that gives you a bit more of a flavour of some of the things we're doing. However, today, I'm not going to present those initiatives in that way. Hazel and I will now do our double act to sort of think about in a little bit more detail the different areas of the HEE vision, the aims within each of those areas of the vision, and how RCSLT initiatives have aligned with those. So not only have we drawn from our strategic vision, but we're also looking to implement ideas that coordinate with various policy documents that exist, and first and foremost amongst those, HE's vision. So if we go into the next slide, and I'll let you start, Hazel, and then I'll come in with the RCSLT activity.
Yeah, so as I showed a moment ago, we've got 3 vision statements. Each of those has a number of aims and objectives and also descriptors of what good looks like. So we can't go into that level of detail now, but for this aim 1.1, in our descriptors of what good looks like, we're focusing particularly on detailed objectives around building research awareness and skills for our pre-reg students and building research skills in the workforce.
Yeah, and so one example of an activity that we're working on through the RCSLT is that Katie, who presented earlier, has been working with HE and the Council of Deans and others on their initiatives around student research placements, and has contributed to the resources that those organisations have developed in that area. And now we are looking to spread information about that across the profession. So we're talking to HEI leads and others about that concept of research placements and alerting them to the resources that exist. I'll let you, Hazel, go into the next one.
Right, yes, for this aim 1.2, our detailed objectives are really around promoting research careers. So that includes both academic careers and clinical academic careers, and strengthening the infrastructure for those clinical academic research roles in particular, and specifically building in mentorship to help people get started in those directions.
And one thing we're doing through the RCSLT, I think I've seen that my colleague Will is on the line, so he's going to be leading a project thinking about developing clinical academic template research CVs. So that's the kind of project that if anybody on the call is interested in, please do go to our website, have a look at the project call, and get in touch with either me or Will, and that project will hopefully be kicking off over the next few months. Slide.
Yeah, I got a little bit ahead of myself a moment ago. Okay, so the detailed objectives under aim 1.3 are particularly about infrastructure, research and clinical academic research careers, roles and mentorship. Sorry, Amit.
No problem. And just as an example, so I think as most of you already know, we are a member of CAPA, the Council for Allied Health Professionals and Research. And through our links with CAPA, we are supporting initiatives to develop a national AHP research mentorship program. And then once that's in place, we'll be highlighting that to speech and language therapists. So quite an exciting development we're hoping will come to fruition over the tail end of this year or maybe the start of next.
Okay. For Vision 2, there are 2 parts to it really, there are 2 key aims. First is to develop excellence in research, and the second one you'll see in a moment is to get that excellent research into practice. So this aim here is very much about what that quality research will look like, and it includes things about co-production of the research, joint priority setting, addressing health inequalities, and also having greater transparency and visibility of our allied health research in the research excellence framework, the academic benchmarking of research outputs.
Thanks, Hazel. So just one example of our activities in this area. My colleague Millie Heelan is leading on our research priorities project at the moment, and in the current phase of that project, we have developed some priority areas across different clinical areas that we work in, and the current one we're thinking about is in relation to learning disability. And Millie is working with researchers, with people with learning disabilities and with clinicians to draw from these broader areas to identify specific researchable, often P-code questions, because in our liaison with funders, that's what they're interested in. Some of them are not interested in those broader areas. So we're developing those very specific questions and then submitting those to funders in the hope that that will then come out as a commission call.
Okay, aim 2.2, please. Yeah. So our detailed objectives here are to increase the recognition of value of evidence-based practice, getting evidence into routine practice. And one way of doing that is increasing the emphasis on the importance of secondary reviews. So using the published evidence base to answer real-world clinical questions and to underpin clinical service planning, and supporting first steps into research for people who want to become more actively involved.
And actually, this first example is a really good example of that, because we've got a variety of activities through the RCSLT that are designed to support members' evidence-based approach to practice. This day-to-day is one of those. And in thinking about what we need to do next over this strategic vision period, we've started off, my colleague on the call, Nikki Grattan, is responsible for leading a rapid systematic review. I hope I've got that title right, Nikki, of evidence-based ways to support AHPs to engage in an evidence-based approach to practice. So we're reviewing the evidence, and then we're going to draw from the results as to what exactly we will focus on as the next step.
Okay, vision statement 3 has 2 aims. The first of these, our detailed objectives, are to focus on influencing local, regional, national influencing.
And you can see there that we're in discussions with all sorts of really big players within the AHP research field to try to support the commissioning of SLT research.
Finally, our last aim, the detailed objectives here are very much about supporting leadership in research. So infrastructure, posts and funding and mentorship to develop that leadership that we will need for the future, that critical mass of research leadership.
And some of the projects we're thinking about here are in relation to clinical academic contracts, which we know are so important in facilitating your clinical academic careers, and also specific thinking at that postdoctoral level. We've had real success up to that postdoctoral level, and like many other professions, it's really difficult when you get to that stage, so we're explicitly thinking of that. Thanks, Katie. Next slide. So that's just a flavour of some of the RCSLT initiatives that are going on across those different areas of HEE's research and innovation strategy. Hopefully we've given you a sense that regardless of what level you are at, whether you're just dipping your toe into EBP in research, or whether you're a much more advanced level, then we are actively thinking of what we need to do across the spectrum of research, experience, capability and capacity. And ultimately we're trying to develop a range of resources, networks and opportunities for you to use to support your EBP and research journey. So I guess the take-home message really is follow our comms, whether it's the Basecamp group, whether it's Twitter, whether it's our research newsletter. Get involved and draw from these resources because they're specifically designed for you. And actually, just a final comment, Hazel and I, in planning this talk, I think we both felt that actually, whilst this has not always been the case, there really does seem to be momentum behind AHP research at the moment. And the commissioning of Hazel's strategy is really testament to that. So I think it's for us to really seize the day and between us, push SLT research onto the next level. So I'm going to end there. Slightly late, Jackie, sorry, but not too late, hopefully. I'm going to hand over to Jackie Mcrae now, who's going to tell us a bit more about her research journey.
So I'd like to firstly thank RCSLT for asking me to present this morning, and particularly want to thank Kamini, the RCSLT research team, and all the staff at RCSLT who do work tirelessly behind the scenes to ensure our profession is recognised for its expertise and highly respected. I'm Jackie Mcrae. I'm an Associate Professor and Director of Research part-time at the Centre for Allied Health at St George's. But I also take on other roles. I'm currently in a secondment role as London Spinal Cord Injury Education Lead at RNOH, Honorary Consultant Speech and Language Therapist at UCLH. I'm also currently the lead author for the RCSLT Clinical Academic Career web pages, Associate Editor for IJLCD, and an NIHR Supervisor and Mentor. So those are just a few of my roles that I have to squeeze in between my two paid jobs. In fact, the description really of my talk was to go through the good, the bad, and the ugly of a clinical academic career. So I've been given 15 minutes to either inspire you or turn you off the whole idea. And in that time, I'm going to tell you a bit about my journey and some top tips about hopefully that you'll take away and think about perhaps even just one change that you can do tomorrow that'll move you on to your next step. And we've already heard great things from both Amit and Hazel about the bigger strategy. So hopefully you will find where you fit into that. A little bit about my background. Both my parents were immigrants to this country. They didn't speak English and they didn't understand English culture. In fact, they did everything they could do to erase their Middle Eastern origins by giving me an English name and sending me to elocution classes. I was the second oldest, still am the second oldest of 6 children, and I'm the only one who's gone to university and has a degree. I really enjoyed learning and I enjoyed school, but I did get into trouble a lot for talking too much. But looking back, my love of reading and hours spent in the library with my books turned me into what I recognise now as an autodidact, teaching myself about all sorts of things. I'm really proud of my origins and my parents' achievements. They instilled in me a curiosity to learn, a determination to succeed, and perhaps it's my naivety that made me seek new opportunities, which might explain why I do the many things that I do. I'd really encourage each of you to reflect on your own starting points and your career drivers. Now, each of you are likely to be at different points in your career. And again, I want you to think about what your future looks like. You're all here today as research champions with a goal, I'm sure. So do you want to be a clinician working as a part of a team, learning and providing leadership and supervision to your junior staff? Or perhaps you're aiming to be a clinical expert, so really delving into a specific area, problem solving about your client group, trying out new interventions, and of course, using evidence to inform your practice. Or maybe you like the operational side of healthcare practice, and you want to manage a team, develop services, and develop good staff. Or perhaps you really love the academic side of speech and language therapy and want to educate the next generation or deliver post-registration training at an allied health level and work your way up to professor. Or perhaps like me, you want to do all of these. It's a difficult choice, but regardless, you do need evidence for all of these, which means gathering data. And that data could be quality improvement, that could be audit, or it could be research. So whatever you're doing at the moment, you're already well on your way. Part of the challenge in research, and I'm sure many of you have heard this, is that they claim it takes 17 years for research to translate into practice. So really, why bother? I think it's the responsibility of each one of us to make sure that we use treatments and interventions that are effective and are relevant for the patients that we work with. Obviously, it's not a straight line, and the starting point is thought to be better when it comes from somebody who is in practice, and hence the development of that clinical academic role, which I really embraced. So back to me and my journey, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about the good things. I qualified way back in 91, so just over 30 years ago. And although I did some paediatric work to begin with, I quickly moved into acute adults and worked at Papworth Hospital initially with transplant and cardiothoracic patients, moving on to Charing Cross and doing neurosurgery, stroke, ICU, then on to Barts briefly for more stroke and some HIV work as well. And then I did a brief stint doing community rehab, but felt that my passion really laid in acute adults. And then I started at the Royal National Orthopaedic Hospital, which houses the London Spinal Cord Injury Centre, back in 2001. Didn't know anything about spinal cord injury, and unsurprisingly, there wasn't very much published. That took me on my route to finding out more, doing my MClinRes and my PhD, after which I went to St George's Hospital, which is a major trauma centre, to really try and grow the service there, and then took on my academic role. In 2020, life for everyone changed. I just started a consultant SLT role at UCLH when a month later the pandemic kicked off, and I was invited to lead the SLT service at NHS Nightingale, which was both exciting and terrifying experience for another day. I went back to UCLH to continue with working with COVID, and I've just stepped out for a year to undertake this spinal cord injury transformation project, coming back to RNOH after leaving about 4.5 years ago. But the things that motivated me to take my MClinRes was really, I was already 19 years in practice. I really thought that research was done by other people, and I was waiting for evidence to come my way. And I suddenly realized that after presenting at a number of conferences and doing case studies, that actually I was probably the person to have to do this research. So I did my MClinRes part-time over 2 years and focused very much on a very clinical aspect of care, which was oral care in ICU for spinal cord injury patients. I was delighted to have achieved a distinction, and this really gave me the confidence to consider applying for a doctoral award. Again, I was successful at being awarded an NIHR Clinical Doctoral Research Fellowship, and absolutely loved being able to immerse myself in my studies, really aiming for clinical benefit. And as anyone who's finished their PhD knows, your work is never done. But along that journey, I picked up lots of new skills, qualitative and quantitative statistical analysis, academic writing. I took myself out of my comfort zone, publishing my work in peer-reviewed journals and a book chapter, and that's an ongoing skill I'm developing. Of course, on top of that, social media has taken huge advancements, and there's a way of sharing our work. I developed a website for the study, a YouTube channel, Twitter, infographics, and numerous conference posters. But of course, the key change that we are aiming for always is having impact on professional and strategic change. And suddenly you find that you're an expert after many years of working. I was delighted to have my work recognised with a couple of awards. I was on committees for the Intensive Care Society, CC3N, RISCI, and the Global Trachea Collaborative, often part of the Patient and Families Committee to really try and represent patient voice for our patients. I've been on a number of RCSLT committees and was lead author for the Critical Care webpage update, and have worked with Aspire on patient engagement. I mentor a number of SLTs and other allied health professionals on their own research journey, and really enjoy networking with people around the world now on my research area. So post-PhD, obviously you are inundated with other requests to do work, and I've been very lucky again to be an international expert advisor, publish, teach, and trying to grow my own postgrad research. Again, really importantly, you want to see your research influencing change. And I've been part of a working group that have developed basic minimum standards for speech and language therapy rehabilitation in spinal cord injury, which we hope will be published soon. And more recently, the NICE guidance that was published in January this year on rehabilitation after traumatic injury has now included the risk for those with spinal cord injuries for swallowing and speech, and asked for early assessment. So I'm delighted to see that recognised. On a global platform, I was invited to join the WHO peer review group to agree packages of interventions for people with spinal cord injury. And I had to really fight actually for the inclusion of speech, language and swallowing interventions, as there was some belief that this was of little value because many countries, and these are low middle income countries, didn't have access to speech and language therapy. And I'm pleased to say that following the group discussion, the group unanimously agreed to include these. So again, these will be coming out soon. I myself have linked up to the Spinal Research Institute, which is an organisation in Australia, and they're actually providing me with mentorship through one of the professors in Adelaide, and that's allowing me to continue to develop myself. On to inevitably the bad bits. And there's not huge amounts, but I think for me, this was a paper that was published last year, which was a qualitative study exploring experiences of people combining clinical academic training with family life. And I think these are the tensions and some of the challenges that we don't openly talk about. Obviously, combining your training with family life, negotiating with your partner about perhaps long days at work or going away for conferences or travel fellowships can be a challenge. And of course, financial issues as well. I myself had 4 young children aged between 5 years and 11 years when I started my PhD. So in fact, I had to carry on with the usual school runs, homework support, exam prep, and of course, sick days. And sometimes work just didn't fit into that life. I'm very fortunate to have a supportive partner, and we paid for childcare and house care in order for me to have control over everything in my life. As you can see, there are still lots of balls to juggle, and I get asked to do a lot of things and I have to still learn to say no. It is a challenge, but I think that's very flattering. If only I could clone myself and extend my 24 hours into 48. Inevitably, we have to move on to the ugly, and this image probably captures everything that I want to say. People only see the tip of the iceberg. They only see the publication, the presentations and the success. But behind that is hours and hours of grant writing, publications that are rejected, and even colleagues that don't support your work. And this is actually part of clinical academic life. And I think when people move from clinical to academic, they need to acknowledge that there is a lot that goes on behind the scene. And we need to be open about this and we need to celebrate it. So I would encourage you to share. Back to you in navigating your journey. For many of the people that I mentor and support, I think the 3 key barriers for them are finding time, finding support, and funding. I'm not going to have solutions for all of these, but I think this model provides some guidance for the pathway for yourselves. Firstly, you need to explore your options. Secondly, know yourself and your skills, take action and plan ahead. And I'm going to go through some of the tools you could use. Exploring your options. This is a great infographic that RCSLT and Katie have put together. I know it's being updated, but I love the image of really planning your route. And there's going to be lots of stops and starts and bends and different directions, but really try and work out where you want to go and then the steps that you need to get you there along the way. Obviously, we have this fantastic resource, the SLT Research Practitioner Framework Resource Map. I really do encourage all of you to look at that. It's been a fantastic collaboration, and it really will guide you to the support that is available to address your needs from a wide network. Obviously, I'm going to say that other tools are available, and obviously there's the CAPA Research Practitioner Framework, and VITAI have also an excellent research development framework. So do look at these, understand where you're at now and the skills that you need to move forward. We've talked already about building capacity and capability. This is just an image from the NIHR fellowships. Obviously other research funding is available, but I like the way that it shows a stepwise progression. In terms of planning your action, you really should set your goals and your timeline. Look for funders or network opportunities such as conferences or meetings to meet with people. And I've just pulled out one bit of that image to try and help you work out how you can convince organizations or managers of the value of your research training. And I'm delighted to see that there's a manager session later to try and talk through some of those. You really need to demonstrate that you are offering something that will advance the organization. Now, this is to do with taking action and establishing your research profile. I think it's really important that while you're putting your plans into action, you need to direct people to where they can find out more about you. And unfortunately, name the game nowadays is being visible on social media. I would say an ORCID ID is essential. So if you don't have one, set that up. ResearchGate is like Facebook, I suppose, for researchers. You can share your publications, conference presentations and preprints, and you can engage with people through that. Twitter, I'm sure many of you are familiar with. It enables you to interact on a global scale, but do follow the rules. But there are opportunities to be had through that as well. And Google Scholar is a freely accessible place to show your metrics, and sometimes this is accessed by colleagues and funders to look at what your activity's like. Some of these do need updating, will update automatically, and some do require you investing in some time, so do plan for that. So just coming to the end then, success isn't a straight line. There are lots of wiggles and dead ends along the way, but as long as you are aware of that, you'll be fine, and there is so much to learn. I particularly have to say a final thank you to my home team, who provide me with endless support and encouragement on those days when I do doubt myself and my skills. I've recently come back from spending 1 month in Israel as part of a research travel fellowship, and I abandoned them through their exams and end of university moving out. So I am very grateful to them. Actually, this month spent in Israel has shown me how very, very lucky and fortunate we are in this country to have access to so many of the opportunities. So really take those on. If you do get a chance to go elsewhere, I'd encourage you to try and do that. So finally, my 15 minutes is up. I want to know if I've inspired you or turned you off the idea, and think about what will your change be. If you want to put it in the chat, if not, you can contact me. If you want to discuss anything further, I can be found on all those places as well as Twitter. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jackie. I mean, the first word that springs to mind is wow. I don't know how you get through the day. You're absolutely someone who has seized the day and pushed forward SLT research to have impact at the level of things like NICE guidelines is amazing. But you also really focused it back on all the rest of us. You're talking about your action plan, thinking about ensuring we know ourselves, and most importantly, take action. And with those links to those really practical resources that you sent through, I think hopefully that provides starting points or follow-on points for everyone. We've now got 2 parallel sessions that are going to run over the next 50 minutes, where we're going to have presentations from research champions within both of those rooms. So please feel free to choose your breakout room yourself. In breakout room 1, the focus will be on championing EBP and demystifying research. And that's going to be chaired by one of our panel that helps us develop it today, Martina Curtin. And in breakout room 2, we'll have a focus on research capacity building roles, and that's going to be focused by another one of our planning group, Sally Bell. So if you want to join whichever of those groups you feel would be of most interest to you, and I'll hand over to the chairs of those rooms. So hi everyone, and welcome back from that break. Glad we got a little bit longer that time. Just going to hand over straight over to Yvonne Wren, who's going to take us through our manager session.
Great, thanks Amit. So hello everyone. It's been a fantastic morning so far. It's been so inspirational, so much fantastic work going on. So I hope you've enjoyed it. Hope you're not too weary yet. I think this is a really important session. I think we're going to learn lots here as well. So for those of you who don't know me, my name's Yvonne Wren. I'm an Associate Professor of Speech and Communication at the University of Bristol. I'm a Reader in Speech and Language Therapy at Cardiff Metropolitan University, and I'm Director of Bristol Speech and Language Therapy Research Unit in Bristol. And that's where we have, over many years, been able to support and cultivate many clinical academics, several coming through the NIHR route. So I'm particularly pleased to be involved today on this Research Champions Day. I'm really kind of standing in here slightly, well, in place of Rebecca Palmer, who would normally be doing this session, but she's on maternity leave. So that's the RCSLT research trustee. So on with this session. So we have, so just to talk a little bit about the aims of this session, the aims are to explore some of the barriers and facilitators to getting top-down and managerial support for EBP, research and research-related activities whilst in a clinical role. As well as this session is hoping to enlighten current managers or those in leadership roles, and I hope we've got several of those here today, with ideas to motivate their teams to engage in this type of work. So we're joined by three inspiring and supportive managers. We have Alison Williams, who's Head of Speech and Language Therapy at Aneurin Bevan University Health Board in South Wales. We've got Dr. Maria Avantijato-Quinn, who's Associate AHP Director, and Charlotte Colsby, who's the Speech and Language Therapy Services Manager from the Royal Wolverhampton NHS Trust. Now, what we're going to do in this session is have a short talk from each of our panelists. They're going to be able to showcase who they are and what they've been doing. And then throughout these talks, we want you to think of questions you'd like to ask the panel and post them in the chat. And then all three panelists will be staying on with us for a further 20 minutes and for a question and answer session. So we welcome you as research champions to pitch your questions to either specific or multiple panelists. It's really helpful if in your question you can say if it's for a particular member of the panel. And we're looking forward to an interesting discussion and debate around how we support EBP research and research-related activities in practice. So I'm going to hand over now to Alison Williams. And yes, welcome, Alison. Looking forward to hearing what you've got to say.
Bore da, Yvonne, nice to see you. Nice to see colleagues across Wales. I'm being slightly controversial today, and I haven't actually got a presentation. I'm going to talk to you around experiences here in Aneurin Bevan. So I'm going to give you a bit of context of my role, what we do here in Aneurin Bevan, and really give you a flavour for the work that is happening here in Aneurin Bevan, that is happening at every level in my department. So my name is Alison Williams. I'm Head of Aneurin Bevan Speech and Language Therapy in Gwent in South Wales. Before I tell you about my job, I trained in UCL back in 1999. And even as a young speech and language therapist, I had a passion even in those early days and was inspired by experts in the field to ensure that I was learning and practicing evidence-based practice throughout my career. So that's my background. My background is early years, and I've had been lucky enough throughout my career to be involved in flying start evidence here in Wales and really considering about how best we support early language across the system. My current role, which I'm very proud and passionate to be, is Head of Aneurin Bevan Speech and Language Therapist in Wales. Aneurin Bevan Speech and Language Therapy Services Aneurin Bevan serves a population of approximately 600,000, and we're the second biggest health board in Wales. And I've got a workforce of approximately 100 speech and language therapists, 78 full-time equivalent, offering services from cradle to the grave, really. And we work in, in a number of settings with a number of stakeholders. So the service is large. The service is extremely committed to evidence-based practice and ensuring everything we do is based in evidence and considers outcome and impact. And that's what I want to start with, really. The Aneurin Bevan vision here is that Aneurin Bevan speech and language therapy services transforms lives. And we do that with the staff. The staff are the greatest asset, because without the staff, we can't get those outcomes for the patients and our engagement with those stakeholders. So one of the points that was noted earlier was that a business of people first, and I absolutely advocate that. Within Aneurin Bevan, I'm pleased to say we have 2 research champions who have been heavily involved in the RCSLT research network, and we use those experts to link with our RCSLT team to ensure that we're up to date with all RCSLT. And I'll start by saying my ethos is that quality improvement and evidence-based practice is everybody's business. Listening to Hazel this morning, I was interested in thinking about the 3 C's, the capacity, capability, context and culture, and thinking about what we've done here in Aneurin Bevan and how that embeds really. What I'll say, what we start with in terms of the way that we embed QI and evidence-based practice is that we use both Malcolm S and Tom's here in Aneurin Bevan. So I am an absolute advocate for outcomes, but also data. We need to, each clinician, both at a clinician level, but also population, we need to understand data in terms of what we are providing, input, what outputs we are providing, and what outcomes we are achieving for our population. Here in Wales, there's a big drive, and it ties in a lot with the talks this morning around value-based healthcare, and that's about outcome and cost. We are a public service. I am accountable to make sure that the services that we provide are driven by outcomes and impact, but also are based on the most recent and evidence-based work. So how do we build that into everyday work? You know, a lot of it has been talked about this morning. Audit, quality improvement. We work with our workforce and OD team. So we have a project within a department, actually within our health board called ABCI, that really helps us look at data and consider qualitative and quantitative data to ensure that we are considering that in all elements of our service, and that's built into service specs. We have robust supervision policy, and I'm a great advocate for ensuring that all staff have opportunity to attend conferences and events, both as learners, but also presenting at those events. I'm really passionate that we celebrate the work that we are doing. And I'll give you a brief overview of some of the small-scale research, but also large-scale research that we are doing here in Aneurin Bevan at the end of my talk. So we celebrate that work to inspire and make sure that everyone in every level in the department hears about the projects that are happening to ensure they're interested and then spark ideas. We have a number of QI projects, and always encouraging our members to think about RCSLT grants. I think we mustn't think remember that in terms of attending conferences for the future. So why have we got so much research and quality improvement going on? It really made me think about it when I was asked to speak, and interestingly, I now know that 15% of my workforce have a post-reg qualification. So that means either a master's module or full master's. And that's in critical appraisal, service user engagement, supporting pathways, as well as leadership. Also, I encourage my staff to be part of the RCSLT expert papers. So, we've got speech and language therapists that are experts contributing to the evidence base and RCSLT papers, as well as the exciting work. I've got my timer on in the background, so let me stop that for a minute. There we go. Oh, it won't go off now. In terms of the work that we are doing All Wales, so some of you may be very aware of the All Wales clinical pathways. It aligns with some of the discussions that happen in the breakout sessions, ensuring that evidence-based practice is embedded in the pathways, and that we've gone to experts outside of an Iron Bevan to ratify those pathways. So Dr. Sue Rodston, Yvonne Wren, around our speech sound pathway, our All Wales language pathway, we've worked with Sue Rodston. The DLD pathway, talked to Dorothy Bishop to ensure that the evidence that my clinicians are using every day are embedded in research, as well as doing small-scale projects to ensure that the work they're doing is shaping the evidence. Two final points, because I could talk about this all day, is we have to think about COVID. COVID has had a massive impact on public services, and without the value-based projects that we're doing and the evidence-based, I wouldn't be in a position to argue for more funding, to argue for increased provision for our service users. I use the evidence base in every paper I write to ensure that that is robust. So I'm in the process of writing a neonatal paper, and I'm using national evidence to support investment in that. But the future is bright for us in Wales, really bright. I was just last week at a fantastic research launch event where Yvonne is going to be working with Cardiff Met as part of Bristol Research Unit, as well as a brand new course in Glendoor. And you know, I'm passionate as a SLT leader that we will breed evidence-based clinicians and clinicians that will shape the evidence base for the future in Wales, and share that nationally to ensure that our patients and the outcomes are focused for service delivery for the future. I could talk for hours more, but I'm very mindful I only had 5 minutes. So hopefully that gives you a flavour. I will put my email address in the chat, but please, if anybody wants to contact me about a little more detail about how we embed it, then please do. My last point is, what am I going to change for tomorrow? You know, thinking about Jackie's point, and thinking about some of the points, you know, about, you know, the cup of coffee, 10-minute QI, you know, well, you know, should we think about having some snapshot QIs that Hazel was talking about earlier this morning? So my learning never changes and never stops. So let's hope everybody else is the same. Thank you all.
Thanks, Alison. That's fantastic. Really, really encouraging. I think hearing about how you integrate the evidence within what you're doing all the time is very encouraging, particularly given Jackie's point earlier about 17 years that it takes for evidence to be implemented. So really pleased to hear that that's not the case in South Wales. Okay, we're going to move on, and I'm really pleased to welcome now Maria and Dr. Maria Avantajato. I tried that, practiced that so many times before. Avantajato, did I get that right? Quinn. Yeah. Yeah, looking forward to hearing what you've got to say, Maria. So over to you.
Thank you, Yvonne, and hello, everybody. Yes, you've heard my name, Maria, and I'm an Associate AHP Director and Chair of the Allied Health Professional North East North Cumbria Council and RNI Forum of our faculty. Next slide, please. So here you can see some key words from the evidence base about why research is important. Since COVID, and in the light of our, as you've heard from Hazel, AHP strategy and the CAPO's AHP Deliver strategy, there's a call to ensure that people are at the heart of our thinking and that we address health inequalities. So the evidence we have called on so far needs to be questioned for its rigour in hearing the diverse voices of all the people that we seek to assist. And you need to be creating new knowledge in partnership with people who access or currently don't or can't access our services. Next slide, please. The issue isn't that we're debating the importance of research, it's really about whether we're ready to prioritise it. So we're faced with extreme pressures in health and social care, and I'm sure a lot of you are very aware of that, working out how to spend finite resources and time for maximum therapeutic benefit. So all this pushes us to see that research is both important and urgent. Next slide. We often hear that managers are the problem and that the block to research activity that they are the main block to research activity in teams. And I think we need to move from a polarized perception of being on opposite sides to having a shared vision of wanting the best for our patients. The pressure from services is now making RNI, research and innovation, essential to reduce wasted time and ineffective treatments. And having underpinning evidence to redistribute resources means that health and care research is not an academic exercise, it's an absolute necessity. Next slide, please. So why prioritise RNI, if you don't mind me using that shortened? We've learned from COVID and urgently need to address the challenges identified here and focus on people. Everyone's looking through the lens of social justice. And as Hazel said the other day, research is a global priority. Next slide, please. So exactly who should prioritise research and innovation? Again, people first and in the centre, but it also needs this national, regional and place-based collective leadership effort for NMAPs, nursing, midwifery and allied professionals, a wider group that we're part of. And critically, we need organisational support for research career pathways. Next slide. So I was asked to share a few examples of the things we've done to prioritise AHP RNI for and my focus is on developing everyday clinicians and making RNI everybody's business. I'm particularly keen on people who aren't at all confident, maybe just qualified or have been qualified a long time and not qualified and not confident, getting them on their first steps of the journey. Because generally, once you've got the bug, and I know I'm talking to the converted, you carve a pathway. But we need to help the people who really aren't on that trajectory at all. So starting with some trust initiatives to support clinicians and clinical teams, we have had AHP developing RNI skills development in our AHP strategies across the trust since 2013. And crucially, since 2017, the board supported all AHPs to take a half-day CPD a month and for CPD to be discussed annually in appraisal. In addition, just a few more examples, the R&D committee 4 years ago supported a pilot to set up 10 £5,000 internship awards from RCF Funding. And that was a really successful initiative. It was actually all AHPs in the first year, not that I'm competitive, helping AHPs to develop their clinical academic skills and capability. And another 40,000 is earmarked for this coming year. One internship helped us to set up a trust-wide monthly CPD writing skills workshop, and that's now in its 4th year. And I think Lizzie's on the call today, and she's part of a group, and we organise and help deliver those. We've just carried out what we call an NMAP plus RNI survey, so that's nursing, midwifery, allied health professionals plus psychology, social work and pharmacy. That started as an AHP survey, and then everyone wanted a piece of the action, and that was to establish baseline perceptions of the capacity, capability and culture for RNI in the trust, and from that we'll build an evidence-based RNI development plan for NMAPs. Incidentally, this was a service improvement project was also funded from an internship award. So from these very small pots of money, there's been a lot of activity. We have used, those of you in England are aware that Health Education England have a CPD monies that go out. We're in the 3rd year of it being, £1,000 per head. So, and we've bid for some of that money to go on AHP research and innovation skills in collaboration with Newcastle Hospitals. So that's an online offering. Last year, we carried out a CPD audit from that, we have a CPD champions group across the trust, which we've just had. I've just chaired that group, and we are compiling a shared resource of a CPD toolkit to have online and available for all our staff in the trust. One of the things I get involved in is about brokering managerial support of how to make things like PCAF awards work in practice. That's it can be a real challenge, but I think having someone to oil the wheels of those conversations can help. And I'd just like to add this in as an important point for all of you really is encouraging academic challenge. As a clinician, I work in child mental health, or have done in the past. A couple of years ago, I was party to a conversation where someone said, oh, I'm going to do EMDR with this kid that had been traumatized in mental health. And someone said, oh, the evidence for that has all changed. And the person went, okay, oh, well, I'll do something else. You know, and there was no challenge back to say, look, can you give me the reference for that? What do you mean? And on both sides, we need to be academically challenging our colleagues in multidisciplinary teams as to whether they're using the best evidence. So finally, in this little suite of examples, we've just launched in my business unit for children's mental health and a research and innovation group, non-judgmental, encouraging space for all staff to talk about projects they either want to do or want to get involved in, and had a good discussion about use of seclusion and restrictive interventions. So, you know, that was really useful. So I won't go through all this, but we also reach up to regional and national opportunities. And obviously you can reach to your professional body, doing a great job here today, to influence them, but also to know what's going on. So get involved is what I would say. We have links with our integrated care system, and these are important that they understand we have an AHP RNI strategy. So next slide, please. So I'm not going to go through all of these, but if you are a line manager, you know, help to create a culture and context where research and innovation, service evaluation and QI initiatives can thrive, and model your R&I leadership. You know, the reason I did my doctorate is because I thought, well, if I don't do it, people aren't going to believe it's possible. I did it on top of a full-time job as a part-time professional doctorate, you know, and it encouraged a culture. Have active collaboration with your universities, and if you're in a university, with your provider organisations, because those relationships are key, and friendships are key, and just being able to chat with people is really important. Support job planning and creating R&I thinking time, and signposting people to points of contact. And obviously you guys are points of contact as champions, so that's really important. Next slide, please. So if you're a clinician, we need to action all of these different elements. I think making sure it's evidence-informed practice, key. I mean, not everyone wants to be a researcher, but we do need everyone to be using evidence to inform what they're doing. You know, and I say to people, if you haven't opened a journal, you know, or looked on a journal for a few years, I don't want you coming anywhere near my family or me if I'm poorly. You know, you've got to know what you're doing is right. So we need to really think about co-production and a people focus. It's much more challenging than you think, but it's really, really key that we're going to, you know, change services like that, and improving people's outcomes and developing career pathways. Next slide, please. So just to summarize, as research champions, you'll already be contributing, and having a point of contact is fantastic. Encourage everyone to be reflective and embrace the innovative elements of the new R&I strategy. That think of service and quality improvements and audits. They're important first steps on a pathway towards formalised research. And not everyone needs to be at that top end, but we don't need loads of boffins. We need people really well informed in their practice. And we need all of you to be collectively helping to make R&I activity an urgent priority and taking practical steps on those challenges which I've highlighted. So thank you for listening. That's me. Happy to take questions at the panel.
Thank you, Maria. That's fantastic. I think that the thing that came through for me there was very much this talk of shared vision, which you said at the start, and then carried on all the way through your presentation, but developing that academic culture where we are questioning and we're using evidence. And with whatever our role is, whether we are researchers, clinical academics, or practicing clinicians, that needs to be fundamental to our practice. So I thought that was really interesting. Thank you. So over now to our third speaker of this morning, of this session rather. So really pleased to welcome Charlotte Colsby, who's the SLT Services Manager at the Royal Wolverhampton NHS Trust. Thank you for your questions. Do keep them coming. And we will have time to ask those at the end of Charlotte's session. Okay, over to you, Charlotte.
Hi, thank you very much. So you're going to be treated to a West Midlands accent now for the end of your session. So it's good to get a bit of regional variety in there, isn't it? I'm Charlotte Colsby. I've been a speech and language therapist for over 30 years. I qualified from Manchester University in 1991, and I've always worked in the NHS. I fairly recently returned to study after a very long gap and completed my MBA. Can I have the next slide, please? And this neatly encapsulates what I thought about research prior to doing my MBA. who me? Is it really me that should be doing that research? Because I thought I had imposter syndrome, which I think a lot of us do. And I thought research was for really, really clever people who had all the answers. And I didn't think I was one of those. And my anxieties mirrored those I actually see in my team now. So I've got a team of adults and children's speech and language therapists. We do adult acute and community, and children's acute and community across the whole of Wolverhampton, which when you Google Wolverhampton comes up as one of the 10 worst places to live in the UK, but it's a great place to work, and actually there's some parts of it that are really lovely to live in. And you know, we're an area with high deprivation and lots of need, and so it's an area where research really is key to us. I wanted to flip around the who me, and I did it for myself, turning it around from who me to why not me, and also then if not me, then who is going to do this research. And I learned that all you need is curiosity and something you have a question about, and everyone here has that, but I think all of our speech and language therapists do as well. Next slide, please. So I thought, in fact, I did wonder if I'd need this slide, but I'm kind of glad I put it in because I knew I was right at the end of all the speakers. But I thought it'd be really interesting to see what HCPC standards of proficiency for SLTs say we should be doing. And I picked out 3. The underlining and the highlighting are mine. So keep your skills and knowledge up to date. Well, you can only do that by being on top of what's going on in the evidence base. Be personally responsible for and able to justify your decisions. So you need to be using evidence-based practice and developing practice-based evidence. And you need to be able to engage in evidence-based practice. And crucially, I highlighted this bit, evaluate practice systematically. Well, if we've got to evaluate practice systematically, then we've got to be engaging in research, haven't we? And so I think that's a really handy one if people say to you as managers or as clinicians, well, you know, research, just get on and do the day job. You know, you don't need to do research. Actually, we're required to do this. And if we don't, we're actually breaching our HCPC standards. That usually does the job when you need to actually point out to somebody why things are important. Plus, obviously, we've got the fantastic AHP research and innovation strategy, which can underpin all of that. Next slide, please. So getting a service started with research. I've been in post for not quite 5 years, and I picked up a service that was a cracking service, really good, been really nicely run. I had a great overlap with my predecessor, and really appreciated the work she'd done. However, the staff weren't engaged with audit, with research, so we started with baby steps, and that's what my picture is represented. If you aren't anywhere yet, start with the baby steps, and the baby steps are getting staff engaged with audits, service reviews, benchmarking, and within audits I'm talking about the little quality improvement programs as well as the bigger audits. Get staff discussing research, journal clubs, presentations to the team, written pieces for Bulletin, written pieces for your Trust magazine. It is a requirement that every SLT has to undertake CPD. We know that, and research can be part of that CPD. Supervision, as Alison said earlier, is really key, and we have peer supervision and management supervision embedded as standard. So let's flip that around. If your manager's not supportive, can you use the baby steps to get them on board? Do all of those things I've just said and get them into conversations with your manager, either in conversation or if he or she won't engage with you, send emails and start an email conversation. Think about influence. Is there another AHP with influence over your manager if your manager's not listening to you? Can you go via the chief AHP, the AHP research lead, the physio manager, the OT manager, whatever it might be? See if you can get some influence. Think of those circles of influence if you haven't seen it before. Brilliant, look it up. Is there a trust priority that links to research? Is your trust a teaching trust, as is? Use that to your advantage. If it's a teaching trust, then it should be having a priority on research and innovation. What are your library team like if you're lucky enough to have one? Can you use them? And don't forget to use the RCSLT research team. They're great. I've used them. Crucially, if you need to get it for yourself, make it an appraisal objective and get it minuted as an action in your service or team meetings. Next slide, please. I have nearly finished. Managers who are supportive of research will be professionally curious and encourage professional curiosity. Those are great phrases. I think you'd defy anybody not to feel they should be that. So they're nice phrases to use. Managers who are supportive of research support time for research. There's no point saying I support research and then saying you've got to do it in your own time. So my manager was really supportive, gave me time to do it, and then questioned me when I was too busy to take it and made me take it. Encourage staff on their journey by supporting them with the baby steps, quality improvement, audits, benchmarking. Support them, work with them. Don't be afraid to do that with them. People enjoy working with you. Plan to include research in your service planning and support staff to explore ways to fund learning and research. There's master's level apprenticeships for anybody who hasn't already done one or wants to do another one. And there are various pots of money which have been talked about already. Final slide, please. What's next? So in my service now, we've got a really good range of audits, and people are no longer frightened of doing audits. They know that there's people who'll help them. We're discussing research. Some staff who haven't done it before have started accessing master's level training, and it takes time to build that iteratively. We're lucky we've got access to an excellent library, and we've got an AHP research lead who's supporting staff to publish their research. So what's next for us? We want to continue to audit and benchmark, etc. We've developed a programme of CPD in the adult team, and they're going to do one in the children's team, where we're using the whole service to work in bits to understand the evidence base, look at the gaps and get a consensus of practice where there are gaps. Research is part of the fairly new advanced post. We've got 3 advanced practice posts now, 2 in adults and 1 in children's. It's part of our advanced practice post expectations. And then we're looking at developing a part-time post for a clinical researcher. The end. Sorry, I ran over.
Charlotte, that's brilliant. Thank you. Thank you. Really, really practical steps there. I think that was really helpful. I think that there's a lot for people to take away there. I like that concept of baby steps. I think one of the talks earlier today was talking about you've got to be able to understand kind of what is important to your manager and what is important to your organisation, and how is what you are going to do going to be positive for that organisation, and that's a good route through. Right, quickly on to questions so that we can get as many in as we can. These are for specific people, I think, mostly. So I'm going to say who it's for at the start, and then I'll read out the questions. I think this first one is for Alison from Sonia Sivia. Alison, how do you implement co-production with parents and children and young people, both for their feedback and for future service design?
A fantastic question. Essential really for building services for the future. So we in our health board have a children's partnership board, and we have measures where we have to have engagement with children and young people in terms of designing services. So that's kind of our health board strategy. But also some of our staff that have done postgrad level have done specific user surveys, user feedback in terms of, so for instance, one of my clinicians has done user surveys with children and with school staff around our school-based DLD service to ensure that we're listening to the feedback, but then using that feedback to change services for the future. It is really difficult, you know, and I'm not going to pretend that it isn't. The other thing that we were doing pre-COVID, and I'm about to restart it, is just simple things like having boxes in clinics where children can, you know, put little feedback, or put parents can give feedback around in a more narrative way around services from anything around our service, and then my business support manager will collate that and we look at themes for, you know, for feedback. But yeah, I mean, it's we're at the early journey, but it's fundamental, absolutely fundamental.
Thanks.
I hope that's helpful.
Thanks, Alison. I'm going to do a quick plug here for the book that's just been published by J&R Press, by which is edited by Anna Volkmer and and Kath Broomfield. It's not specifically about co-production, it is about PPI, so public and patient involvement in research, and how we do that with the whole range of different populations that we work with communication impairment. And I think there would be some very useful ideas and strategies in there that could apply to co-production. I'm sure Kath will be very happy to talk to people about that. Okay, moving on. Question for Maria. Maria, what tool did you use to do your survey?
Yeah, thank you. Good question. So I built on the same tool which is a standardised measure that's been devised by Queensland University that the Kappa champions used for their national survey of which covers the areas of capacity, capability and culture. So it measures perceptions about all those three areas. So the reason that I use that, well, one, so that we have an evidence-based baseline, so that our policy was going to be evidence-based, or a plan of our delivery plan of action that comes out of it, but also so that, because we know that the Kappa champions now have shared some of the findings of that survey from a national perspective, there's data there that can be looked at from a regional perspective, and I wanted us to have a trust perspective so that we could have a comparative analysis of where we were nationally. So that was my reasoning and thinking, and that's what we used. I would say the downside of it, it's very long. It's not far off 90 questions. I think it was quite off-putting. We still got over 300 people responding, but that within a very large trust was quite a low response rate. So I think there's downsides to using that as a tool, but the upside for me is it's kind of been said before, we can go and make arguments based on really sound evidence of using this particular tool. And also, after a certain number of responses, it's quite clear what their barriers are, it's quite clear what the facilitator is, kind of in a way not telling us an awful lot we didn't know. So, but it gives us a robust evidence from which to make arguments, strategic arguments for development.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things to pick up on. That one is that there's a research project in there to start with, isn't it, to see which questions are the most important ones to use, and which other questions are actually just saying the same things, and then you could reduce the size of the questionnaire. But as you say, that sometimes it's saying what we know already, but we need that evidence to say that. And yet, as researchers, we have to start the process with being completely open to whichever way, whatever findings we may get. Sometimes the findings are quite surprising. We get things we didn't know. But thanks, Maria.
Okay.
So another question for you. This is a question for information, actually. Can you post some of the funding links you found useful for small scale funding? So I don't know if that's something you're able to perhaps share with the RCSLT research team after the meeting today. If it's easy, you could put it in the chat, but I'm thinking you might need to go away and find them.
Well, to be honest, all of these internships were generated internally to the trust. So most trusts that are research active will be getting RCF funding through to them. And I think within our trust, traditionally, it was going to big and traditional researchers, the main big kind of professors within our organisations with big themes of research. And we made an argument that that some of that money needs to go to bringing through the new researchers. So we bid for 25% of RCF funding to go into these small scale projects. So yeah, there's a pot of about 200k, and we managed to get 50k in the first year, which divided up into 10 pots of £5,000 of internship funds. What we found in the next year when we evaluated that is that actually people didn't always use all that money. You'd be surprised about that. The issue wasn't the money, it was the permission to do the task, to be able to be involved. So, it would often fund a half a day or an amount of time for a clinician to be out of practice. So I don't think I'll be able to send you lots of links, because really most of those initiatives were from internal RCF funding. I think the argument needs to be had with your R&D boards for them to do something similar.
Okay, great. There's one more question, but before I go to that, I just want to pick up on, so RCF funding, for people who aren't familiar with it, if you're in as Maria was saying, if you're in a large or a teaching trust or acute, often I think it's the acute trust, then this funding is available. This is something that RCSLT and perhaps the other AHP organisations and NMAPs, as you were saying, perhaps need to pick up on, because it's not so available for community trusts. And I think there is a big gap actually between what's possible if you're working for a large acute teaching trust and what's possible if you're working for a community trust where there is much less research going on. So I just say that out there for the people who are working in those kinds of environments, because those kinds of fundings aren't available unless your trust is already doing a lot of research. So we need to think about other opportunities. Right, last question, because it is actually 12:40. Q&I, and I think this could be for anyone actually, but Q&I and R&D are quite separate in my trust. Any good references to demonstrate the need or benefit to linking them up? Now, I'm not sure whether that came in while you were still speaking, Maria, or whether that was for Charlotte. So, Maria, you're speaking. Do you want to have a go at that one?
Well, you know, Hazel's on the call. The evidence is in there. Our new RNI strategy embraces quality improvement. So there's your reference for getting it together. And I would just say that it's, again, not a polarized thing. You don't have to just think about Q&I here and research there, that it can be part of a continuum. I know people talk about there being different language and such like related to Q&I, but I think it's whatever opens doors in people's minds and hearts to become involved in evidence. So, and there is, the Health Foundation have an AHP Q&I network. So I would, if you're interested, find a bit more information out from there.
Thanks. Charlotte, I'm just going to come to you very briefly in case there's anything you wanted to add to that or any of the other questions.
Yeah, I mean, I'd just add to what Maria said there. There's advantage to having two teams. You can go and find out what makes both of them tick and see where your piece of work fits best. And if it, you've got two bites of the cherry, haven't you? You can work with one or work with the other. So, I think take whatever. Barriers can also be opportunities if we look at them the right way. That's all I'd add.
Thanks, Charlotte. I'm handing back over to Amit. We've gone a couple of minutes over, but thanks very much. That was a fantastic session. Thank you to everybody.
Yes, so thanks for that, everyone. Just to reiterate what I'm saying. So we have come now to the end of the first part of our day, but there is a few more sessions to come. So we've got some poster sessions which are more clinically focused from a few of our research champions, probably from 12:45 to 1 o'clock. And then we've got our networking sessions open from 1 till 2, where either you can join me and Nikki in our research surgery, or you could join the poster presenters in their rooms, or you could just go into a couple of other rooms that are set up just for general networking. And I know we've talked about the fact that there are so many questions that this day has brought up. So you could well just go to those networking sessions to explore those questions as well as any other networking opportunities you want to build on. I don't know about for others, but for me, my head is bursting with ideas. My pieces of paper are full of scribble. I found it a really fantastic day. So I just want to start by thanking all of our presenters. It's been really interesting to hear all of your information, and you've put a lot of work into preparing these sessions for us. So thank you so much for that. I want to thank you all as delegates as well. I know we're not ending now, so don't want to send a confusing message, but these days are for you, and so many of you turned up, so it's been great to see you there. Just quickly a shout out to our events team for organising today. It's been your usual seamless organisation, even though there are less of you in the team, so thank you for that. A specific thanks to Martina Curtin, to Sally Bower, to Yvonne Wren, who have been part of our planning group for this day. It's been imperative to have research champions planning this event. So thanks so much for that support. And as Yvonne said, she stepped in because Rebecca Palmer has moved on now in her role as trustee and was unable to make today. So thank you so much to all of you for that. Just as a last thank you, actually, anything that may not have been perfect on this day is probably eventually traceable back to me, but anything that's been good has been because my colleague Katie Chad has planned this day, and she's been absolutely fantastic. Unfortunately, she's not feeling well today, so after her talk, she's had to log off. But just to say thanks so much to Katie, who'd really led on this event. So the plan now is to go into our poster sessions for 15 minutes, and then after that there are the breakout rooms, which will be all 5 of them. So I think now, Jazz, I don't know if we will be choosing our poster sessions, I'm guessing, to go into. So I think that will come up like it did for the 11 o'clock session. The first one will be focused on pediatric research, the second on research in the adult field. So I will be joining you in one of those. Please do choose your breakout room, and then from 1 p.m, feel free to come in immediately or grab your lunch and join us while you're eating your lunch. So thank you so much to everyone, and see you in the next session in a minute.